Hello friends. I'd like to start off the channel with speaking on something that I've been doing for myself lately. Something I request of anyone listening in on this. I ask you to make things harder. In our modern world, obviously, we've worked towards gaining a lot of comforts. I love my comforts. I'm an indulgent person. So I'm not ever going to be asking anyone to be removing themselves completely from any of those comforts. But just make things a little bit harder every so often. So we live in this time where things are changing, and we want to be flexible. We want to be flexible in our mind. We want to be flexible in our body. But we also really want to be flexible with our schedules. I know a lot of people really struggle with finding time to do things, finding time to get some movement in each day, to cook for themselves, to spend time with their partner. But maybe we can incorporate some of those things into each other. So, yeah, make things harder. Whenever you choose to stand in a space, if you're in line at your local grocery, choose to put your weight on one leg versus on both, versus being that locked knee, or maybe you're really attentive, or maybe you're really slouched, but choose to purposefully add some pressure, some stress into the situation physically. Stress one leg, maybe stress the other, maybe stress both. Can I relax my posture a bit more? Is there any tension I'm holding anywhere? Now, I've made standing a little bit harder. After a few minutes of standing like this, it's likely that your legs, because my legs do, you feel that. You feel a little bit of a tremble there. So that's a really simple way to make something like standing harder. But we probably stand around enough. We want to be moving more. So to maybe incorporate some of these slots that I was saying just a bit ago. Here's cooking at 5:30. Food's done by 6 o'clock. 6:30, you're ready for your workout. Maybe we can combine some of those things. So if you're cooking, I imagine that you could place your cutting board on the ground. Clean the floor up maybe if that's what makes you feel comfortable in the scenario, but take a nice deep squat and see if you can work some of those finer motions of cutting a potato, or of cutting peppers up, or onions, or preparing your meat. See if you can combine this squat with some of those finer mobilities in the upper body. And then if maybe you're putting in a pan, and you got a pan full of water and potatoes now, a pot. Now you're working from this squatted position as you lift it and put it up on your counter. That's going to be where you're cooking. As I cook, currently I'm living in a 20-foot yurt. I came from an 1,100 square foot apartment where I had all the comforts in the world. My cooktop was waist high. I had all this counter space. 2 steps over, I was in my fridge. I could reach in and grab my ingredients. The sink was behind me. It was a really easy process of cooking. It was a great arena for me to explore cooking, for me to learn a lot about how I want to cook. Some deer behind me, 3 deer actually. But now I find myself actually being in the yurt. I'm cooking on an induction top that's on the ground currently. I just don't have a counter yet. Maybe it's something I'll build in the future. Right now I don't have a good counter to cook on. So I'm actually down here cutting my veggies, prepping my meat, cooking my food, then lifting up, grabbing my spices off of the spice shelving that I have, and working back and forth. And then if I want to go to my refrigerator, which my refrigerator is currently a styrofoam box, I walk, 18 feet to the other side of the yurt, and it's quite small. So I'm down in here, I'm working, I'm grabbing my ingredients, I'm walking back. Then with dishes, right now I currently don't have any running water in the yurt, so I have to take those outside, and I end up doing a lot of using snow currently to scrub some of that off, and I'm using a spigot outside. Luckily there's a hot water spigot on site, and makes it a little bit easier to clean the dishes outside. But I've definitely managed to make things a lot harder when it comes to cooking and cleaning for food. But another way, simply, you can do it for yourself is even if you don't want to prep your food on the ground, how do you typically eat your food? Are you sitting in this giant throne of a chair and mowing down on your food as you're watching TV? Or are you sitting at your typical dining table, again in a very comfortable seated position and eating right here? Maybe choose just to take that squat again and work from a harder position to eat your food. As you're cutting your steak or your meat, or holding your taco and working with some of these motions, one of those more subtle motions in your upper body. It's a little bit harder if you're in that squatted position versus having this area to work on. You're working downward, or as I said with the spices and stuff currently, there's a lot of reaching up. So test yourself in the kitchen, see if you can maybe make that a little bit more difficult for yourself. I want to share an example of how most recently I made things really hard for myself. I'm currently working on friction fire. I'm working on flint and steel, and I got the sparks, I got the char cloth, and I got my tinder bundle going, and I've got a gist of it now. But the second day that I was working on this, I told myself that I was not gonna cook until I had created a fire. Well, I actually was kind of gifted this large grill. It's beautiful. I've not done much grill cooking, and I was so ready to cook my large venison steak on there. And before I allowed myself to actually cook that steak, I chose to create a fire first. It took me 5 tries, and by 5 tries, that actually took about 50 minutes. That's because I kept trying to kind of cheat, and I would use smaller tinder bundles than I should have. I was also in the snow, so I was trying to create a fire out here in the elements. The wind was blowing, and at one time my rock broke, my flint broke, and so then I had wet rocks to use and wet steel to use, so I had to let those dry. But it was quite the challenge. It wasn't just a challenge, physically being down here trying to create a fire while it's cold outside. You're losing dexterity in your fingers. It was also a challenge mentally, to sit there for 50 minutes and try to do something like that. Now the very next day, I went out to the woods to create a fire, just to test my abilities again out here in the elements. And nearly the first strike on the steel, I get some sparks on the char cloth, and I had gathered plenty of tinder. I created a beautiful little triangular shaped stack of sticks, and with an opening in the front where I could slide the tinder bundle in. And I really got a fire blazing really quickly, and like 5 minutes, and I had something beautiful going. Versus 50 minutes that prior day, working so difficult in such difficult, at that time difficult manner. The very next day it wasn't so difficult. And imagine if I had just chose to grill the steak versus choosing to start that fire. The very next day, if I went out and started that, tried to start a fire out here in the elements, it's not likely that I would have gathered all that knowledge of ensuring that I have a large enough tinder bundle and stacking sticks in the correct manner, and just being like, I'm gonna do this right. Like I'm determined this time. I've practiced. I practiced for 50 minutes the day before in not the best conditions. So yeah, this is a way that people have been doing things for a long time. We haven't, not until probably most recent history, were people really working at this counter top level space whenever they're preparing foods or anything, as we're working on a computer. And it seems to make more sense to use my body in the manner that it's capable to get tasks done. So I'm not going to do this every time I try to cook. I don't do it. I didn't do it today. But it is something to keep in mind, just to make things harder every so often. So give it a shot. Share in the comments. Let me know how you can make things harder for yourself. It will help others. It will inspire them to think of things that how they can make things harder for themselves. And it will inspire me to think of ways that I can do it for myself. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. And looking forward to reading the comments.